Hi guys, in this video you will learn how to play some traps in the Italian opening. The Italian opening start with pawn to e4, e5, knight to f3 attacking this pawn, knight to c6 defends the pawn, bishop to c4. Bishop to c4 free up f1 square to enable white castle the king faster in the game. The bishop on c4 also have influence through this diagonal to f7 pawn. In this position, black has two main responses, which is knight to f6 or bishop to c5. Let's continue with bishop to c5. Play c3. c3 open up this diagonal for the queen to use in the future and set up a base for you to launch d4. If d6, play d4. This move is asking black if you would love to take the pawn with the pawn or play bishop to b6. If pawn takes pawn, take the pawn with the pawn attacking the bishop to gain the tempo. White has a massive influence in the center, which is an advantage as early as move 6. If bishop goes back to b6, continue with castling the king side, or you can simply develop your knight to c3. In this position, most beginners make the mistake to counter this bishop very early with bishop to e6. Play d5 very aggressive. If knight to a6 going after your bishop on c4, take this bishop here on e6, which is winning, because if knight takes the bishop afterwards, we can simply throw queen to a4 check to the king. After c6, take the knight, and you have a piece very early in the game on move 11. After pawn to d4, if black plays bishop to b6 right away, take this pawn here on e5. If pawn takes, simply exchange the queen on the board. If knight takes the queen, this pawn is now free. Capture the pawn with the knight. If the king takes the queen, we can capture this particular pawn here, which is free. In this position, if knight takes the pawn instead, take the knight. If pawn takes, you take this pawn with check. If king takes the bishop, then queen takes queen is winning for white. In this position, black would love to defend the queen by playing king down to e7. We can simply trade the queen, king takes. In this position, white has an extra pawn. In this position, after pawn to d6, play d4. Pawn takes on d4, pawn takes on d4, attacking the bishop. If bishop to b6, d5 is aggressive, attacking the knight. Playing knight to e7 is safe. Playing knight to e5 is safe. However, if knight goes to a5, how do you punish this move? This is a greedy move that intends to capture your bishop on c5. Simply drop your bishop to d3. Suddenly, this knight is out of good squares. If pawn to c6, then b4 traps the knight. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, c3. A different approach would be queen to e7. Simply castle the king away from the center. If d6, you play d4. If bishop to b6, then you play bishop to g5. After f6 blocking, bishop to h4. If g5, this light squares towards the king is now weak, so we can play a decisive sacrifice by taking this pawn. If pawn takes, queen to h5 comes in with check. If the king moves to d7, for safety, bishop takes pawn attacking the queen with tempo. Queen to g7, you can simply play another sacrifice by playing bishop to e6 with check. If king takes, queen goes to the back rank check. If queen blocks on e7, then d5 is checkmate. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. If bishop to c5, c3, knight to f6 attacking this pawn, you can go all aggressive with d4. If bishop to b6, we take the pawn attacking this knight. If knight takes the pawn hoping to go for safety, queen to d5 is a double attack. Join forces with the bishop to attack f7 pawn and also threaten to pick this knight on e4. If your opponent tries bishop takes pawn on f2 with check, go with king to e7. It's either your black opponent will lose a piece or will be checkmated in the next move. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. If bishop to c5, c3, knight to f6, d4 immediately. Pawn takes on d4, pawn takes on d4. If bishop to b6, e5 is aggressive. If knight to g4, h3 attacking the knight. If knight to h6, then d5 attacks the second knight. If knight goes back to e7, play d6. If knight comes to j6 for safety, then we can launch bishop to g5. Suddenly, the queen is almost trapped, but black has f6. We can simply take the pawn on f6. If pawn takes on f6, this knight is now hanging. However, we can gain a free piece by taking the knight right away. But you can throw in a sneaky queen to e2 check. If the king moves, then bishop takes knight now gives a checkmate. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this content, do not forget to subscribe to my channel for more, like this video and share to your friends.